following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Leanna Kersner, and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for going good crazy. This week, I'm going to tackle a topic that modern culture is obsessed with: bad people. What makes a bad person? What's the distinction between a bad person and someone who just makes a lot of mistakes, makes a lot of messes? And what about those particular type of conformists who are perfectly fine on their own, but get them in some mob mentality like a protest and this horrible alter ego comes out? There's a lot of subjectivity in this topic, a lot. And it dives into that thorny issue of intent, what's going on in somebody's mind that no one else can know for sure, but we can certainly infer based on certain tells. So to keep things safer emotionally, I'm going to use fictional characters for examples of good people or people who just do bad things from a show I love. Amazon Prime's The Boys. Yes, The Boys. I love that show because you know, good person, bad person, maybe in between person. This isn't just mere philosophy, right? It's self-defense. Avoiding bad people is generally good for your well-being. Now, fortunately, most situations don't require you to determine definitively whether someone is overall good or bad, because you can just focus on the behavior and set boundaries. But bad people do exist. I know this is a philosophical thing. Some people don't say so, but I believe they do. They can completely destroy social groups and systems if they're allowed to hurt people unchecked. Now, the other side. There are some mental health conditions that cause people to irrationally fear that they are a bad person. OCD, schizotypical conditions, they can cause that intense fear in the person that they're just inherently bad. CPTSD, caused by overly critical and abusive parenting or other things, can do that too. Anxiety, especially anxiety over being ostracized from groups, can lead to extreme guilt and the belief that the mistakes everybody makes, those fleeting selfish thoughts we all have. People with extreme anxiety can think, oh, I have these bad thoughts. You know, I'm always, maybe I'm a bad person. In moderation, those fleeting thoughts, the social mistakes, they're just being human. Now, you're probably going to get sick of me saying it depends on this show, but it does depend a lot of the time whether people with, mental illness are, just hurt people, or whether they're bad people. People with unresolved trauma can do some pretty heinous things. I have a pretty high threshold from when that crosses into bad people territory. And for this show, I had to stop and think about a clear definition from when we cross from one state to the other. Because having a clear definition of what makes a bad person makes it easier to feel confident that you aren't one. And that, in turn, makes it easier to own your mistakes and learn from them because you're not crippled by guilt. Now, some people, as I said, don't believe in good or bad, but you do hear a lot of discussion of toxic people. They're all over social media. This is another one. I think being labeled toxic, I think the bar's too low. And the problem with that is too many truly bad people get lost in the crowd and get away with too much because people have too many false positives on their toxic person detector. We don't make enough space in our social calculus for just misunderstandings. It's interesting, though, that a toxic person has a clear definition that bad person lacks. And I suspect that's because toxic is more about impacts causing misery in people around you because of manipulations, attention seeking, erratic behavior, constant conflict. A toxic person doesn't respect boundaries. They can't be happy for your successes because they're too competitive, and they tend not to accept responsibility for any of this stuff. But is a toxic person a bad person? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. There's no need to determine intents. If they're constantly blowing up your phone or worse, your life, you can go, this is bad for me, even if they're not a bad person. But again, bad people exist. And the only real data, the only science, or the closest thing to it that I could find about what is a bad person, trying to take some of the subjectivity out of it, is something called the Dark Triad Psychological Framework. Now, the Dark Triad Framework refers to narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Now, 2 out of those 3 things, Machiavellianism and psychopathy, are not actual mental health conditions. And narcissism, it depends. People can show symptoms of narcissism without a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. So putting narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy in less buzzy language, it means that if someone uses other people as tools for their own ambitions instead of people with their own views and feelings, if someone displays a clear lack of empathy for other people, if they deliberately manipulate and deceive, if they exploit people, if they frequently act without thinking, then they won't take responsibility for the consequences of that impulsivity. If they tend to display a lack of authentic remorse, these combination of traits is sort of, mostly science bad person territory. There is still some subjectivity. There is still some wiggle room, but this is as close as we get on this subject. Basically, if someone seems to enjoy hurting people, I mean tormenting people, trying to make them suffer, that's the mark of a bad person, even if said person claims it's payback or some sort of form of justice. True justice is about restitution, not revenge. And there's something really wrong if someone delights in making someone suffer. Now, truly Machiavellian people, that cold, calculating, logical form of bad, the media loves these type of characters, and they're much rarer in real life just because most people don't have perfect clarity to scheme that way. Most bad people won't outright admit that they enjoy the suffering of others like a truly Machiavellian person does. There's always an excuse for why it's okay to torture somebody this time. And this is when we get, the first example from a recent episode of The Boys. And cover your ears for a few moments if you don't want spoilers here. There's a scene in a recent episode where Homelander is watching this video of something that happens in season 1. And he knows that video is authentic, but he watches that video again and again, methodically convincing himself that the video is fake and he is being wronged and harmed. It's using a sound psychological principle for evil instead of good. The reality that repetition retrains the brain. And I'm going to talk about Homelander later. And, he definitely has narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies in spades. But that particular tactic, that convincing yourself of something that isn't true, that's not exclusive to narcissists. But because narcissists need to feel superior, special, and, emotionally gorged, that's that narcissistic supply people talk about, they will ruminate on a series of events where they did a bad thing, no, they didn't, or they made a mistake, no, they didn't, because they very much struggle with admitting they're wrong or fallible. So they will play the events back to themselves or repeat it to others again and again. And as they do, the story starts to change. Order of events will get rearranged. Small but important details of how things were said start slipping. Where the story begins may be altered to slip reality. Over time, this person will convince themselves that they didn't do anything wrong. They only did what they had to. They were given no choice. They're the real victim. And this results in, this is extreme. The Boys is extreme, but it results in Homelander asking the coffin of a person he killed why everyone leaves him. Because you kill them, my dude. But not in Homelander's mind. They made him do it. It's their fault. Why are people so awful to him? Why didn't they anticipate his needs? Why did they betray him? Now, if you've never met a person with this sort of thought process, I understand why you might think that Homelander is a silly, farcical character. And he is. But Homelander is actually one of the better examples in media of the symptoms of cluster B personality disorders. Yeah, he's sort of a mix of a few of them. I'll talk more about this later. But he's not Machiavellian. He's not preternaturally calculating and in control. And this might be why some people don't realize that Homelander is clearly a villain on The Boys. Again, more on Homelander later. The character on The Boys who is the most Machiavellian is Sister Sage. Great character. Scary. Not mentally ill in the way Homelander is. Unlike Homelander, who needs to embellish his achievements and can't admit mistakes, Sage actually is, on the show, the smartest person on the planet. She just uses that power to misanthropically and strategically manipulate others, prioritizing her self-interest over any real moral principles. She's cynical. She's cold. Unlike Homelander, there's a very important distinction. She doesn't relish the spotlight and doesn't need to be liked. Her primary goal seems to be constantly proving to herself that she really is superior. Now, Sage is not a psychopath. These dark triad tendencies can, display on their own or in combination. Sage doesn't enjoy killing. She doesn't enjoy much of anything. She also can't be classified as a sociopath the way a character like Stormfront can. Remember her? Because Sage doesn't have that reckless impulsivity. Now, I'm way over time on a break. I can't wait to get into this more with you. So let's come back with more profiles in bad people and not so bad people who do bad things using the Amazon Prime show, The Boys, because it's fun to talk about. But first, a note about work of some good people. My social media manager, Megan, is also an opera singer, and I want to give a completely shameless plug about an original opera she's performing in called To Remain. There's 2 shows, April 28th and 29th, starting at 7:30 p.m. at Meridian Arts Center. That's 5040 Yonge Street, just south of North York Center Subway. That's in, North Toronto. To Remain is a contemporary musical production drawn from testimonies of Holocaust survivors with powerful and haunting melodies. The production features voices that refuse to be forgotten in more ways than one and addresses the growing urgency of Holocaust education today. Survival is not only about staying alive. It's about bearing witness, ensuring that memory, identity, and love are carried forward. Proceeds from To Remain support the End Jew Hatred movement in its fight against the rise of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. Again, performances of To Remain are April 28th and 29th, 7 p.m. at the Meridian Arts Center in North York. You can get a discount code from this program, gives you 15% off tickets, either at Ticketmaster or, if you don't want the Ticketmaster fees, jewishvoicesinmusic.com. That's jewishvoicesinmusic.com. Discount code JVM, like Jewish, J, Voices, V, in Music, M. JVM 15 is the discount code. Now, that being said, I think we can agree Hitler was a bad person. Sorry, Stormfront. When we come back, more on bad people and The Boys on It's Not Therapy.
following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca.
We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Leanna Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking about bad people and not bad people who do bad things, using the Amazon Prime show The Boys characters. It's in its final season. I'm loving it. It's an excuse to talk about something fun on a topic that actually is really important. Because The Boys is such an over-the-top show with such over-the-top characters, it's a great way to demonstrate examples of, good people who do bad things versus outright bad people, and then people who really are on the line. Now, for me, the show is an examination of the difference between doing bad things out of desperation and a sense of injustice, and then literally, legitimately terrible people who are charismatic, but ultimately irredeemable. And it does show, we'll get to these examples a little later, it shows how difficult it often is to tell the two apart based on people's behavior. Now, before the break, I already identified Sage and Stormfront as legitimately bad people. I mean, Stormfront is probably the easiest one on the show. She is a parody of narcissistic sociopaths in the influencer space. She is a literal true believer Nazi. There's no wiggle room there. Now, I don't like using the term sociopath as a rule because it's not a formal diagnosis. It's something of an outdated term. There's an argument to be made that Stormfront is a candidate for a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder, which is much tougher to detect in women. But fictional characters, so, it's stigmatizing a fictional character's mental health, not the same as a real person. Now, Sage, on the other hand, she doesn't use flattery and charm to get what she wants the way Stormfront does. And well, Sage doesn't admit her mistakes to others because she's too arrogant. She does learn from them and adapt. And that makes her more dangerous because she doesn't have that particular life-destroying effect of a mental illness. Now, ironically, both Sage and Stormfront, too many S names, are supremacists, another S, in their own right. And for me, belief that you're part of some sort of master race is, a warning sign that we are in bad person territory. Now, like I said, I'm going to talk about Homelander later. He needs his own block of time. He definitely shares a lot in common regarding, grandiose supremacist thinking. But let's move on to some other terrible people from the show. These ones may surprise people more. And this is what's interesting is when we get into values work, people are like, but this is the fun about talking about this show. Victoria Newman, the, loosely based on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez character, especially in look. She's another character I'd say on the show is a terrible person. She's more of a case of, nature versus nurture. She was raised by, a character played by Giancarlo Esposito. Giancarlo Esposito playing a character is pretty much shorthand for this is a bad person, right? His character's name is Stan Edgar, and he raised Victoria Newman. If you're like, that sounds like The Young and the Restless. Yes. It was a name check back in the day in the comic. Now, Victoria's not all bad. She's just majority bad, right? She is capable of sincerely caring about people. The reason I say bad person, not just does bad things, is her manipulative and murderous tendencies go beyond ruthlessness into sadism. She enjoys hurting people. And you'll remember off the top, I said that's one of those things that indicates a bad person. Madeline Stillwell, the Elizabeth Shue character from season 1, is also, I believe, a truly bad person. She's another one. Not just ruthless. She's so manipulative that she's one of the few people that can keep Homelander under control well until she couldn't. But she's also apparently one of the few people Homelander sees as possibly a superior, possibly because she consistently sexually abused him when he was still a minor. Yeah, yikes, bad person territory. But that's it. Wait, what? Yeah, that's it. These are the only major characters on the show I can say with certainty pass my test for god-awful, terrible people. Now, there are many others that I classify as amoral for various reasons, or the not bad people but do bad things type. But let's do that. Let's do the not bad people now, because palate cleanse, right? Huey, Mother's Milk, Frenchie, probably the three most, obvious not bad people on the show. They struggle greatly with some of the stuff the boys do. They all do bad things, but they sit with their guilt. They acknowledge they're plagued by it. They try to make things right when they can. I'd say Queen Maeve isn't a bad person. Remember her? I miss that character. She was really emotionally beaten down. But she's not bad. She's got toxic apathy, but she's not bad. She did try to support Starlight, in her own way, even if Starlight didn't listen. More on Starlight later. This next one I really had to sit with. I immediately wanted to go, Kimiko's not a bad person, but capable of explosive violence that she seems to enjoy in like this giddy, childlike way. But it's probably more an example of like child abuse and operant conditioning. She does have empathy. She shows great loyalty and a protective instinct. She has morals. It's just some of the morals that she were taught were warped, because she's as likely to save a life as take it, and goes more and more and more into the save a life territory as the show progresses. I'm going to say not a bad person. I'll also say A-Train is not a bad person. And I would not have said that season 1. I probably wouldn't have even said that season 2. I was A-Train, bad person in the early seasons because he was so superficial. He was so unaccountable. He was so selfish and insecure and obsessed with commercial success in that really obnoxious professional athlete kind of way. But the ongoing adversity he experiences humbles him instead of making him more fragile. And as the show goes along, he develops real character and a sense of right and wrong. He probably is the best redemption arc on the show. Now, there's more to come. So I haven't seen this week's yet, so there could be more. But yeah, very surprised. A-Train, not a bad person. And now we get into the amoral, super messed up characters that, to me, present more traumatized than straight up bad people. And this is an important distinction to make in real life too, because, terrible things beget terrible things. But, it's important to get this right so that, we can increase the good in society instead of creating more bad. So Soldier Boy, oh boy, this dude, he's getting a spin-off series prequel for a reason. Let's do all the bad first, right? Toxic masculinity embodied, right? That 1950s through 1970s sexism. He's insecure, bitter, petty, was abused by his father, perpetuates a lot of that abuse on other people. He's brutally violent, like so brutally violent. He's likely the reason Black Noir is Black Noir. Now, regarding Black Noir, the first one, some people categorize him as a psychopath. I do not agree. It seems more like he has a traumatic brain injury due to Soulja Boy's beatings. And some people can go, yeah, there's no difference. It's about behavior. Again, psychopath is not like a form of mental health term. It's an outdated terminology to describe certain types of prisoners. But somebody with a traumatic brain injury, you can't really judge them on conventional scales of good and evil. Now, it's undeniable like Soulja Boy and Black Noir are dangerous. But Black Noir, when we get inside Black Noir's head and see those hallucinations, it's pretty clear Black Noir is running in not criminally responsible territory. Yeah. Getting back to Soulja Boy, again, obviously dangerous. I can't say he's a good person at his core, but I can't say he's bad either. What I can say with certainty is he clearly has severe PTSD. But he has some very clear good qualities. He's capable of humility, respect, courage, remorse, and discipline. He's just the product of so many kinds of abuse that it has warped him. His social skills are hilariously terrible, especially with women. He's comically, reactively homophobic. Like, he so overdoes it that it seems to me he might be speaking out of some deep shame in that area. But he does have a moral code. It's just wildly out of step with modern times. And he follows orders. His name is Soulja Boy. Even when the orders are awful and contradict his personal moral code, he'll do it. He does racist things. Promotes racist policies like distributing drugs to black communities in the 60s, He doesn't seem to be at heart a racist. He's just under orders. It's that waffling between honor and cruelty that makes him really tough to pin down in terms of being a good or bad person, or at least bad person or not bad person. Good? No, I wouldn't go so far. But on the whole, I will argue he's more a product of his time than a terrible person. He has better angels you can appeal to. Now, we have to go to a break, but when we come back, I'm going to talk about the characters. I honestly do not know if they're bad people or not, which is the brilliance of the show, and more on Homelander. Lot to talk about there. Questions, comments, concerns, Leanna at nottherapyshow.com, at nottherapyshow on social media. If you have a different take, I'd love to hear it, because this is the fun of these shows. Reasonable people can disagree on this stuff. And remember to check out To Remain, an opera by Jewish Voices in Music, April 28th and 29th at Meridian Hall. Tickets through jewishvoicesinmusic.com, jewishvoicesinmusic.com, discount code JVM15. Bad people or good people who do bad things, using the boys' characters as examples after this on It's Not Therapy.
The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca.
We're back and It's Not Therapy. I'm still Leanna Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking about determining the difference between bad people and people who do bad things. And we're using the characters from the Amazon Prime show The Boys to do it. Now, before the break, I talked about the characters I was prepared to say were definitely bad, or definitely not bad, despite the bad things they did. But there are quite a few characters on this show where I'm not sure. And engaging with fiction this way is a great way to sort of practice, prepare, examine for the messier stuff in real life without gossiping about real people, right? Now, the Furs, I'm not sure they're a bad person. I want to get this out of it because this one pains me. This one hurts me to admit. I so badly want to cheap out and say that the Deep is bad because the Deep is a creep. He's a rapist, but he's also a rape victim. And, let's face it, he's just terrified of Homelander and desperately wants to get his approval, which is the prime motivation for everything the Deep does. I can't say for certain that the Deep is in his bones a terrible person because he's just so chronically terrified. There's an argument to be made that he is all a product of conditioning. He may not even be intelligent enough to truly think for himself. The way this show has researched and created these characters, so well done, because there are guys out there like that. Unlike A-Train, who grew moral strength in the face of adversity, the Deep is a follower, so failure just seems to increase his panic. He's heavily impressionable and a horrible conformist. He jumps on every quick fix social trend that will earn a quick buck. The whole manosphere arc, the church stuff just makes so much sense with a guy like him. But I don't want to confuse my Soldier Boy-like personal revulsion at cowardice with a reaction to true evil. I will absolutely say the Deep is a coward. But I think that if there had been a path for him to feel valued and accepted that wasn't in Homelander's orbit, it's very possible he would be a completely different person. He's more thoroughly pathetic than truly evil, which doesn't make him someone I'd give my time to, but I have to be objective. And Firecracker is in the same boat for me. I think she's awful. I really do. But she mainly hurts herself, other than, slinging the propagandistic nonsense, that mix of Fox News girl and right-wing social media influencer. But again, if she could get money and attention for expressing views I agreed with, she'd likely do that too. She's sad. She is a mean girl, but she's more victim than victimizer. Now, I wouldn't trust her as far as I could throw her, don't get me wrong. But is she an inherently bad person? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not so sure. She's venal. She has no pride in herself. But is that bad person territory? I'm not sure. Now, the flip side of this is Starlight. And I mean, Starlight, you immediately feel for. The Deep, episode 1, coerces her into a sexual encounter. At first, Starlight is depicted as being naive and really ill-equipped to navigate the superhero team on the show, the Seven. She's pressured into a highly sexualized costume. She's struggling with imposter syndrome. She's pretty. She's nice. She's victimized. You're taken in. But, yeah. Starlight, real name Annie January, adapts too quickly to the way Homelander world works. She one-ups him too many times for that sweetness to go too deep. She manipulates and blackmails easily and somewhat successfully, and this was all before the big twist that she bullied Firecracker when they were kids in beauty pageants. Girl bully from that young, ooh, sorely testing me, bad person, but that might be my own trauma, right? Starlight's worst qualities really come out in her on-again, off-again relationship with Huey, who, I designated Huey is like one of the most clear. No, he is not a bad person, right? Guy on the show. He's in all this because A-Train killed his girlfriend. I can't tell if Starlight's behavior with Huey is because she's just really screwed up by, being that teen beauty queen kind of Britney Spears type, or if what she does to Huey is narcissistic tells. You know, she really seems to struggle to have real empathy to the terrible things that happen to Huey. I mean, they're so terrible. They're like darkly comedic, but they are still terrible. You know, even when he has a near miss with a violent sexual assault, even when he's sexually assaulted by deception, Starlight, it's all about her. She's more concerned with her own misery. You know, when she can't handle the emotions of thinking Huey was dead for exactly 7 seconds, she takes off. She abandons him. And Butcher is seeing the same things I am. He's repeatedly digging at her because he sees similarities between him and her. I think the remaining episodes of the show, I hope, they will give more clarity regarding what we're supposed to think about Starlight. You know, she might just be an emotional disaster, but she might have some very real dark triad girl bully characteristics under her good girl exterior. In real life, watch girls like Starlight. Watch them very carefully. And then I'm leaving Butcher second to last. Billy Butcher. He's like, you know, one of my favorite characters on the show, even though he freaking irritates me to no end. He certainly self-identifies as a bad person. He tries to be a bad person. His language is actively repellent. But that may be a cope to overcome the fact that he still has a conscience. You know, he sees the awful things he does as necessary. He's driven by revenge with a side of death wish. You know, it's a combo of intense hatred of Homelander, but also profound grief at the loss of the woman he loved. And even before that, he has really severe trauma in growing up in a emotionally and physically abusive home. What's the actor's name? John Noble? He's another one. He's up there with Giancarlo Esposito. Cast him, bad person, right? You know, Butcher's very, very aware of his explosive capacity for sudden violence. It's a point on the show. But unlike the truly bad characters, Butcher makes no excuses for any of this. He hates anything about himself that reminds him of his abusive father. He's ambivalent towards kids, you know, minors, because he doesn't want to repeat the cycle of violence and trauma that he grew up in. He waffles back and forth between his better angels and utter hatred of people with superpowers. You know, then he ends up taking a drug to give himself powers that literally twists him up inside. And this is what makes him such an interesting, complex character. He's somebody who's talking himself into awful to get the job done. But he's very persuasive. So maybe he's done a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe he's been fully complete. I think he's a very tortured soul, and the only thing that's going to let him go probably is his death. Very tragic, but I can't say he's a good person. I can't say he's a bad one. I don't know. That's what makes this show so cool. He's relatable. He's sympathetic at times, horribly unlikable and unsympathetic in others. Great character, feels very real. And now we're going to go to another break, and then we're going to come back and talk about Homelander, who needs his own segment, and I need a break before dealing with Homelander. Homelander is a character who is mentally ill, and that doesn't make him a bad person. But he is a terrible person. Questions, comments, who do you think is bad or just does bad things on The Boys? Let me know. Leanna at nottherapyshow.com, at nottherapyshow on social media. Remember to check out To Remain, an opera by Jewish Voices in Music, April 28th and 29th at Meridian Hall. Tickets through jewishvoicesinmusic.com. Discount code to get 15% off, JVM15. A deconstruction of Homelander, continuing Bad People on The Boys after this on It's Not Therapy.
The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca.
We're back and It's Not Therapy. I'm still Leanna Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking about bad people versus good people who do bad things. And I'm using the show The Boys to give extreme examples of, like, the thing about the show is most of these people would be considered by society as bad people, but some are more complicated than others. The one who some people think he's the hero of the show, but is pretty clearly intended to be the final boss, the big bad. I'm talking about Homelander. And again, I said before the break, mentally ill villain on TV. That can be dodgy, right? But I do think the show, the symptoms of mental illness actually make him more sympathetic. You feel for him in those moments. Being mentally ill doesn't make you a bad person. You know, and Homelander's definitely mentally ill. He's also a bad person. And one of the things about The Boys is how predictive it accidentally is. And the increasing narcissistic delusions that eventually become full-blown hallucinations with a religious component. This is why narcissistic personality disorder is a illness, right? But the show doesn't go for a flat, easy, simple, check every box depiction of somebody with narcissistic personality disorder. Instead of the sort of textbook shallow emotions other than rage, narcissistic rage, if you've ever been on the receiving end of it, woo boy. But, you know, the sort of, the textbook definition of narcissism, other emotions are shallow. You know, Homelander's actor, Anthony Starr, he doesn't play him that way. He rapidly flashes through, you know, multiple extreme emotions, 3 or 4 in a matter of seconds, just with acting, just with facial expressions. And those extremes are much more consistent with that, like, raw wound or burned quality of the emotions of someone with borderline personality disorder. And again, I'm talking about personality disorders in a show about bad people. Having a personality disorder, even a cluster B personality disorder that's, you know, narcissistic, histrionic, antisocial, or borderline, that does not automatically make someone a bad person. If they use their condition as an excuse, as a get out of jail free, to hurt people and hurt people some more, and I can't help it, I'm just hurting, I'm hurting. If they do that, instead of recognizing that it's their responsibility to do the work, to work with their condition, to regulate and process their own emotions. And that's very hard. I'm not downplaying that struggle, but they are responsible for their behavior. And if they are not willing to be responsible for their behavior, that is what makes someone a bad person. More on that in a bit, because there's an extra bit to Homelander, right? He is violent. He is violent, not just impulsively, which, you know, narcissists can be suddenly and explosively. Narcissists is rare. It's rare that narcissists are violent because, you know, that would blow that superior self-image that they may like violence, but they don't do it themselves. People with BPD can get violent in one of those explosive lashing out moments, but there's pre-planning in some of the stuff Homelander does. He's like all the violence, and then he shows no remorse. And that, you know, hey, just let's do the violence that's not simple narcissism, right? Even with the impaired empathy that comes with narcissism, there's antisocial. So we're getting like the narcissism, we're getting the antisocial personality disorder is the condition that when we say someone is a psychopath, that not completely, but there's the most overlap there. So he's got 2 out of the 3 dark triad, you know, bad person points. And antisocial personality disorder can sometimes co-occur with narcissistic personality disorder. So can borderline personality disorder. You know, Homelander's this cluster B personality smoothie of a character, you know. And that's way more interesting and, quite frankly, more common in real life, who somebody just neatly fix into check every box of a condition. But because of this, you know, he has this childlike emotional vulnerability. And that's why people think they can manage him. They can control him, feed his ego, and he'll behave. And that is a mistake with guys like Homelander. They're excellent at eroding the boundaries of the people around them in a game of mutual manipulation, you know, exchanges of wealth, shared sadism, sexual favors. But he has an expectation of unconditional empathy, not just for his feelings, but for his lousy, juvenile, impulsive, sometimes just planned bully behavior, which at that point, it's not unconditional empathy. It's a lack of boundaries. If you demand someone accept the unacceptable on an ongoing basis, that's bad person territory. Now, if you want to see more about Homelander, check out my social media feeds, wherever you social media. I'll talk more about this because I'm out of time. But this was a really fun show for me. I hope you enjoy it too. Check out To Remain, an opera by Jewish Voices in Music, April 28th and 29th at Meridian Hall. Tickets through jewishvoicesinmusic.com, 15% discount code JVM15. Thanks for them for giving me a discount code for that show. I hope you've enjoyed this show. You know, if you like it, let me know. Leanna at nottherapyshow.com, at nottherapyshow on social media. Let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the boys, and you're crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you or others. See you next time.